Hello guys, welcome back to this new episode. Today we are going to talk about Rasputin, and that is going to be the life of a quite bizarre monk. With that being said, he was born in 1869 in Siberia, a place that was far away from Moscow and the center of power that at the time was St. Petersburg. But he was destined for success. At a very young age, he started building a reputation for himself. The beginning was kind of very complicated because basically was able to identify the culprit, the person who had stolen his dad's horse, and then from that point on, his career as faith healer was on the right path. Rumors spread about his powers and his magical powers, I should say, and therefore he started very early to reunite himself and a group of followers in the basement of his dad's house. They could gather there and then they could pray and whatnot. It also created a chapel out of this basement. But it is important here to say that this reunions, this sort of like cult, is known as Chlysty, and it is very well known because of self-flagellation and because of orgies. So you can kind of understand that the monk we're going to discuss right now is going to be a very bizarre, to say at least, monk. Let's start talking about it though. So at a very young age, he decides to go to a monastery, that of Volkulturia. And in 1886, he meets another peasant, that is Praskovia Dubrovina, a young woman from whom he had 7 children. Now, unfortunately, only 3 of them will survive into adulthood. But that is a very similar fate to the one he suffered himself, because he was born and he had either 6 or 7 brothers, and again he was the only one to survive all of them. The rest of them died pretty much very early on. Now, in the monastery, because we are in the monastery, he thinks at a certain point that he saw the Virgin Mary. And so from there on, the reputation just spiraled up, grew and grew and grew until he reached St. Petersburg. And St. Petersburg at the time was the center of power, was where the Tsarina was. And so here there's a very interesting and intricate sort of situation. So at court, we do find the Tsar Nicholas II and the Tsarina Alexandra. One of their children is a very frail kid suffering from hemophilia. Now, hemophilia, if you guys don't know, is that sort of disease where basically somebody or that person lacks of platelets, right? And what happens is that the blood, is very fluid and cannot coagulate and does not clot, in other words. Now, this is a positive thing because basically we don't have strokes, but on the other hand, is a very negative thing because whatever wound will keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding, right? And this will cause external as well as internal sorts of bleedings. Now, being that the reputation of this very eccentric man, Rasputin, was increasingly growing, the Tsarina at a certain point decided to invite Rasputin to the palace. Now, we can either believe that Rasputin was actually a faith healer or not, but we do need to say that he actually made very smart recommendations. He prohibited the usage of aspirin, that thins the blood and so it makes it even more fluid. He suggested that Alexei, the son of the Tsarina, had to be at all times always relaxed, and so he suggested to send away all the doctors. And it actually helped the guy to feel much better. So he was absolutely loved by the Tsarina especially, but also by the Tsar. Now, he was not just a faith healer. He was an ambiguous and very interesting man. He thought that salvation is strictly interconnected to sin, and there is no way to dissociate or separate the two. They are closely interconnected, and one cannot exist without the other. So there is no repentance in the classical sense of the term. And that is exactly what caused the Holy Synod to attack him vehemently at the time, and to support the cause that in reality the Orthodox religion believes something completely different from what Rasputin at the time was propagating throughout the whole country. Might be because of this belief that he was very well known for drinking a lot and for sex. Yes, it did not count that he was married. That did not matter whatsoever, right? But all of that also caused weird and absurd stories to spark quite rapidly. There was a story that was circulating that he had raped a nun. Now, there are some stories here that are truly absurd, meaning they could not have happened. He ended up at a certain point under the surveillance of the palace police, and the reports, the most famous of which are known as staircase notes, do testify the impossibility for Rasputin to go out so freely and so without any form of control. But on the other hand, he was very known for disrespecting the rules, and so there were always constant rumors circulating about him having affairs with women. Most of these rumors might have been also correct, might have also reflected the reality of things, but there was one rumor that was very insisting at the time, and persistent, that was that he was sleeping with the Tsarina. The Tsarina was German, not from Russian descent, and definitely would support Rasputin at every turn, in every sort of situation. So that might have sparked, that kind of idea. But with that being said, we also know that Rasputin was pretty much against war, but he also suggested that Nicholas II should have led the troops. I honestly don't know why and how he came up with that idea, but the Tsar knew nothing at all about troops and leading the troops and military command, right? So that was an absolutely disastrous decision on his side, and did increment the violence of the attacks of the different political parties that were not supporting the Tsar at the time. Indeed, what they were saying is that Rasputin had put forward that idea just to liberate himself from the Tsar and have more room to maneuver with the Tsarina. Anyway, most of these rumors were completely unfounded, right? Whereas it is completely true that Rasputin openly accepted bribes, that he held a very strong power at court, and that he used his power as he pleased. Yeah, it is also true that he had a certain degree of authority, and that he was very exposed. And all of that happening while the empire was collapsing before their own eyes. So there were two attempts to put an end to Rasputin's life. The first was carried out by Kyova Yuseva. Kyova Yuseva is a woman, and she was working in the same place, in the same little town where Rasputin was at the time, and she stabbed him in the stomach. Really and truly opened up his stomach. But a stab for a man, for a monk, so bizarre and so weird, like Rasputin, is really nothing. We think nowadays that the motives that inspired that gesture have to be traced back to political and ideological reasons. Kyova Yuseva was a woman that was deeply affected by the court politics and the court policies that Rasputin had propagated. Anyway, he survived. One stab is nothing at all. But the second attempt that happened 2 years later is going to be fatal. Even though the stamina that Rasputin shows is unbelievable, it sounds like a sci-fi story of sorts. We are 2 years later, and he was invited to dinner by a group of noblemen, and the chief, the head of this conspiracy, is Felix Yusupov. Now, Yusupov will tell the story that he laced with cyanide, with a potent poison, the cake that they gave him. And that there was enough poison to kill 5 men. Probably he ate just one piece of this pie, one piece of this cake, so he was able to survive that poison. Now, that could be either because he ate very little or because he actually had been injected himself with poison so that so to create some sort of immunity to poison. But then after that, what happens is that Felix Yusupov goes like, okay, fine, let's shoot him, right? Now, he survived the first shot. We are at a point where Rasputin actually wakes up and says something that sounds like, oh, bad boy. And Rasputin himself tried to strangle Yusupov. At this point, Yusupov would call like the rest of the noblemen reunited for dinner, and they would shoot at him 3 times. Now, basically at this point they didn't even know whether he was alive or not, but we know that they wouldn't risk it for any reason in the world. And so they decided to tie him up, wrap him in a carpet, in a form of like rag that they had, and threw him into the Neva River. Now, we also know that there was water found in Rasputin's lungs, which means that he actually survived a total of 4 shots, which is, wow, amazing. And then on top of that, he only basically died because he drowned. And the river, the water of the river Neva is considered to be a holy, sacred place for the adepts and for whoever believes that Rasputin was actually a faith healer. If you think that that's it, you're completely wrong. There is one last legend that is important for us to discuss, and it concerns Rasputin's male genitalia. Yes, we are going to talk about his penis. Now, basically, we do know that that it is said that before the last 3 shots, he was castrated. It's true that Rasputin has that kind of reputation, that he was very famous for locking himself into a room with a randomly met woman, a woman that he had just met and that he didn't know much about. He's exactly the type of monk, the type of traditional monk that we can all imagine. Just kidding. Anyway, his penis. He was revered, worshipped for his sexual properties. Very well known is the fact that he had an entire group of women known as little ladies who licked his finger after eating. Not only that, he would just go around and have his fingers licked by every single woman there, which is gross and kind of disgusting, but my opinion. But with that being said, let's go back to his penis. So it is said that he was castrated, and basically we do know that there was a rumor that a guy named Michel Augustin in France. France is the designated home for a group of noblemen after Yusupov and after Rasputin's death. That Michel Augustin actually, he said that he had found Rasputin's penis, but he didn't. They actually discovered that he was just like a sea cucumber and not really his penis. But in 2004, a researcher at the Academy of Sciences in Moscow said that he had recovered the actual penis from Rasputin given to him by an anonymous collector. Now, can we understand whether or not that is true? Absolutely not. The autopsy report said first that there wasn't any male genitalia there, and then eventually that it was there, so we don't know the truth. We're also not gonna dig up Rasputin's body just to understand what is exactly the truth, and that's one very important point. So I will leave you to that. What actually happened that night? Can you tell me? Also, how on earth is this possible that we know this amount of information of so private, info about Rasputin's penis? I have no clue, but we do know that. With that being said, guys, that's it for today and for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to hear your comments very, very soon. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoyed this episode, and we're going to talk some more next time in a new, completely new, different topic and different episode. With that being said, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you can receive every new update, and also just leave me a comment here. Let me know what you think. With that being said, guys, bye-bye.